Nigeria. Africa's largest economy is the 55th most vulnerable country to climate change and 22nd least ready. Overarchingly, climate change is projected to cost 6 to 30% of Nigeria's GDP by 2050, translating to $100 billion to $460 billion in losses that threaten realization of shared socioeconomic development aims as enshrined in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan and Vision 2020. At the core of high vulnerability in Nigeria and indeed Africa is the prevailing low levels of socioeconomic development. Communities are unable to afford the goods and services they need to buffer against the worst of climate change impacts. This implies that enhancing income and enterprise opportunities is at the core of building climate-resilient communities, and for this, value addition is a critical solution. Decentralizing solar dryers, a climate action solution, to power value addition and preservation in some critical agrovalue chains in Nigeria, tomato, cassava, rice, etc., provides a strategic route to build resilience by unlocking income opportunities. While Nigeria is the second largest producer of tomatoes in Africa, it loses up to 60% of what is produced, averaging over $70 million each year as post-harvest losses, largely driven by inadequate processing. It spends up to $1 billion each year in importing tomato and tomato paste. In 2017, the country is said to have lost tomatoes valued at $15 billion. This is in addition to climate change, which threatens to reduce production at the field level by 25% per hectare. Tomatoes are not the only casualty. With regard to the cassava, where Nigeria is the largest producer globally, up to $400 million is lost each year as PHLs. Rice registers up to $155 million in PHLs, and the list goes on. Because of these losses, iconic policies like the cassava bread policy and the tomato production policy, meant to safeguard Nigeria's producers, fail to be meaningfully implemented and realized. Solar dryer, a timely solution. The solar dryer stands out as a timely solution, a potential silver bullet to tackling these nexus challenges. From Kenya and Uganda in East Africa, to Cameroon in Central Africa, and right here in Nigeria, the effectiveness of solar dryers to cut PHLs and create income opportunities but without piling emissions is manifest. In Cameroon, women cassava farmers leveraging on cooperatives have financed the acquisition of solar dryers to dry their cassava and preserve it for longer while maintaining quality. As a result, they have reduced their PHLs by 30% and increased incomes by 150%. In Kenya, use of solar dryers in the rice value chain has proven to be 48 times more efficient than the business-as-usual open sun dry. While the BAU scenario requires an average of 2 days to solar dry, solar dryers are just about an hour. These dryers are also more effective ensuring moisture reduction to just about 10%, which is much more effective than the 14% threshold needed to prevent aflatoxin attacks. In Uganda, solar dryers were used to dry cassava for milling into flour and starch, as well as drying fuel briquettes made from cassava peelings. Right here in Nigeria, solar dryers have revolutionized the way tomato, pepper, vegetable, and cassava farmers view market days. While previously, end-of-market days meant counting losses where a large basket of tomato can be sold for just 20 naira in fear of spoilage, with solar dryers, farmers have nothing to fear. Tomatoes or vegetables that are unsold at the end of the market day are simply solar dried and converted to dry tomato as an alternative product line. Papaya, cassava, tomato farmers can charge up to 30 times more for their dried produce in the off-season, which could not sell during the peak seasons as a result of glut.
In the past, Miriam Luther was often forced to sell her produce far too cheaply because it was on the verge of going bad. When dried, pawpaw, a relative of papaya, keeps a lot longer, and the new tent is a great improvement in terms of hygiene.
Whenever I have my farm produce dried outside, goats will eat them up and flies will perch on them. But when I dry them inside the tent, they are free from dust, flies, and they get dried, still looking fresh and the nutrients intact.
Pawpaw, okra and cassava, popular ingredients for making soup. The dried produce can be sold at large markets and for higher prices during the off-season. Then the farmers can charge 30 times more for tomatoes.
This solar tent is of great help. During the raining days, we dry our crops efficiently. Before the tent, we had lots of post-harvest wastage due to unexpected rains. Even when farmers cannot sell at market days, they dry them and sell out of season and make a higher profit.
Drying fruit and vegetables in the sun is the traditional way to preserve them, but out in the open, they're exposed to bugs, dirt, and weather. The solar dryer does the job of drying faster and more efficiently and hygienically, as produce is not soiled by dust, animal droppings, and other debris to ensure higher quality. These are just examples of what Nigeria stands to gain from scaled-up adoption of solar dryers. And given the existence of transformative flagship policies, the tomato and cassava policies earlier alluded to, Nigeria's potential benefits are more clear-cut. Projections show that the solar dryer applied to cassava will preserve cassava to prevent losses in times of glut. These dryers, as part of a system of cassava value addition in driving the cassava bread policy implementation, which will create employment for hundreds of thousands, about 260,000 in cassava farming, over 40,000 in processing of high-quality cassava flour, and about 3,000 in manufacturing equipment like the solar dryers. These are reserved estimates for flour only. Cassava can be processed into 300 diverse products, and factoring in a multiplier effect of just 2 translates to over 600,000 jobs, excluding transportation and bread improvers' value chains. Similar decentralization of solar dryers to preserve and process tomato and driving the tomato policy will create no less than 60,000 direct jobs. The time of the solar dryer for real climate resilience in Nigeria is now, and Ebofoso working with SON can make this happen.